Garrett and Bobby, thank you for your messages. Any comments, questions for each other, or anything else you wanna add in? Very helpful. Charles Hedman texted me and said about your two talks, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. This is what we need.
I do have one comment I was going to make at the end is just be sure you can encourage imperfect obedience and service. My 2-year-old son will sometimes say, yes, Daddy, or he will sometimes obey. And when he does, our whole family erupts in celebration and clapping and cheering because we are thrilled with those tiny little seeds of obedience, and we want to see those seeds nurtured and grow. And so if you encourage imperfect service and imperfect obedience, you further embolden your people to serve, then you've got more to encourage because you see them stepping out in service, and it's a glorious, positive feedback loop.
And Bobby, I thought you did a great job of modeling what Nathan talked about, of showing this kind of Jesus. With those promise, he's a promising, promise-keeping, glorious, helping Jesus. So I thought you did a great job with that. Thank you. It was encouraging. Thank you. I'm glad you saw that.
All right, guys, on the front, anything else? Speakers, anything you want to add or question, throw in from the talks? All right, generally, just any questions. And you got to get the attention of the microphone holders, and then it's over to you. You got to stand up your name, church, and then...
Hi, David Tulloch, Knapp Station Community Church, North New York. And a question for Garrett. You just kind of mentioned it in passing, but how do you facilitate or build this intimacy and this biblical unity of eldership to help you with this church dynamic? But you mentioned it in the letters and you just mentioned it in passing, but how do you facilitate and build that?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I'm blessed with some of the best elders on the planet. I love our brothers. There's 10 of us, and it takes time. Elders, you can't microwave an elder for multiple reasons, but I mean, you can't make that happen quickly. I'm sure that's illegal.
Not in the district, actually.
Not in the district,
but anyway,
yes,
I digress.
But it takes time. So you want to pray, because the Lord loves to give gifts to his church. So you can know it pleases God to give elders. He wants his church healthy, so you can know it pleases God to give good elders. So pray for that. I think spending time with brothers, so watch people. This is where it's really important to know your flock and pray that God would help you to see who are the people who are exhibiting the sort of elder-type qualities that you want to be watching. Then start spending time with them. Read books with them. Read Bible with them. Teach them how to read the Bible. Give them opportunities to teach and to bring them in on counseling or visits, and just have them around. And over time, so take this is where planning to be at the same church for a long time is really helpful. If you can take the long view, say Lord, in 5 years, could I have 1 or 2? And in 10 years, could we have 5 or 10? Lord, would you help cultivate this over time? So take the long view and be intentional with them.
Thabiti, Bobby, anything to add on that? Thabiti, you've had a few different elderships you've been a part of. Anything you want to add as far as counsel?
Yeah, no, I think that's great counsel in terms of taking a long view and investing in guys. And I would say choose well. Choose slowly. Lay hands on no man hastily. Communicate this sort of vision for the culture of the eldership, as well as the culture of the church that you're trying to sort of lead toward, and have lots of conversations about that. Daydream together about that. What does that look like? How do you fit into this picture? Do you fit into this picture? And don't be afraid to say to a guy who you think might be an elder one day, not yet. So those things are kind of ironed out and thought through, and you have the kind of unity coming into the eldership that you hope will only blossom while you're serving as an eldership.
Because how they respond to that not yet will show whether they're closer or further away than you thought.
Exactly.
Yep.
James Ryder, Newman Baptist Church, Maston, Ohio. I just want to say thank you, Garrett, for your message especially. As someone who serves bivocationally, dying to myself daily is a struggle. And I was wondering if you could speak to, what I found is the idea that you can balance these things is impossible. That it really comes down to redefining what your actual role at the church is and not trying to do things you can't do. So I was just wondering if you could speak to us for a second into how to walk through that with your church when they've had years of expectations of what a pastor is, and now just the time constraints don't allow it.
So just to be clear, so James, you're assuming that your church, or that a church in mind, has unrealistic expectations.
I think most do.
Okay.
I think the first thing you want to do is make sure you and the Lord work through it, to make sure you understand what you actually think He's called you to understand your own limitations, because every brother's a little bit different. So Zach Eswine's, he used to be Sensing Jesus, Imperfect Pastor. Imperfect Pastor is a great book to read. It's a little long, a little wordy, but it's so good. In there, he helps you understand you're not omniscient, you're not omnipresent, you're not all the omnis. You can't be everything and do everything. Figure out what that means for you first before the Lord, so that you can be you're not performing, right? And then I think over time, what you want to do is you want to teach realistic expectations as you're going through the Bible, just laying before them. This is what this looks like for us as Christians together. And I think it's fine for you to just be honest with your flock, especially as a bivocational pastor, just to say, brothers and sisters, I just want to be clear with you. This is where I am. This is what I think the Lord's called me to do. I believe He has me here. I want to be here. This is what you can expect from me. These are the things you probably can't. Let's talk about that. And just be humble in front of them. Be one thought.
Yeah, I heard of a pastor one time who was helping a church find a new pastor, and he was having a meeting with them and put up on a whiteboard, say, okay, so what are your expectations of this new pastor? And he got them up, and then they assigned a number of hours, that they would think maybe per week. And the total was something like 120 hours. And once they could see that, everybody laughed. But he took, I think, like half an hour or so, 45 minutes doing this. But it really helped them to understand, okay, I've got pretty unrealistic expectations of my pastor and what the pastor will be. So some kind of exercise to help your church think through what its expectations are and should be. Yep.
Rob Myers, Veritas, Columbus, Ohio. I asked
And Rob,
Garrett,
Rob, what's your role there?
I am a lay elder.
Okay. And how many lay elders are there?
8, I think. I've been a lay elder for a week and a half. So
Excellent. Great way to start out.
we have 5 paid elders at the church. So 4 congregations. Anyways, my question I asked Garrett, and I just want to open it up to all of you. But what advice or encouragement might you have for the people in a lay eldership role when it comes to managing your time and giving time to your family? When you work on Monday through Friday and church is on Sunday, and Saturday there's a lot of church activities. So
I got nothing.
First of all, praise God. I'm glad to hear the Lord's call on your life, man, and being freshly minted and getting a good start. Praise the Lord. I pick up with where this brother's question and my brother's answer started, which is go ahead and assume a finite amount of time and then put in the big rocks first. So you got to work, right? You got to go to work at least 8 hours a day. That's how you're feeding your family. That's how you're providing in so many ways and contributing financially to the mission of the church and so on. Got to put that in there. That in some ways is a vocation prior to your calling. Then I think you got to put in family, right? So the date nights that the brother was mentioning, the vacations, things of that sort, put that big rock in and protect it as such. And then I think you have to look at your margin. And this is probably an exercise you need to do before you become an elder, to know whether or not you can effectively serve as an elder. Then you got to sort of look at what kind of margin you have, given those other 2 sets of priorities. And then these brothers were, I think, helping us really wonderfully. At least I was being pastored. So he was talking about thinking about how much your family can partner with you and kind of shoulder with you in terms of your ministry to the church. And so there's a conversation to be had with the wife and the kids, and to be thinking that through as well.
So I wasn't serving as a lay elder before this, but I was trying to do elder-like work when it wasn't my job. And one thing I tried to do was just finding ways that me doing some kind of extra ministry, extra time with somebody, either would it be in a kind of time when it wouldn't impact my family, maybe my wife had something she was doing and I could be around the home and kind of fold somebody in, or any kind of flexibility in my schedule where there was somehow already time away from the family, I was able to roll something in. Now, granted, I had a degree of flexibility, but yeah, thinking through, are there ways you're able to serve others, serve in the church, disciple people, that would have less of an impact on the kind of family time you're trying to set aside?
Well, and to that point, to Garrett's point, as a team, as Team Kell, as Team Anyabwile, so for example, a lot of the practicing of hospitality that an elder is supposed to model, we do that as a family, right? We're going to eat dinner anyway. Come eat with us. Look at me, I'm gonna eat dinner anyway. So, come eat with us, and we break bread in that way. So a lot of it is done. This is why I think the conversation with what the family can kind of shoulder is important. A lot of it is done as a family or in the rhythm of your life as a family.
Yeah, Rob, right? I would just encourage you to notice, especially what Garrett said about his Monday, his day off. And for you, with your job, I assume that has to be Saturday. Usually. Saturday. Yeah. So when you say church activities on Saturday, that's like a big flashing light to me. So your church must want a lot of divorces. You know, why would it plan activities on Saturday and it wants people to gather on Sundays?
You can't say that.
Yes, I can. Yeah, I mean, you
don't want that.
I think you cannot, you're a leader in the church now. You cannot plan as if people have nothing to do other than church activities. That is just not smart leadership at all. That's one of the reasons it's great as a pastor, and you're an elder now, brother, it's great just to have a stripped down schedule for a church. If you're participating in the idea that the more programs we have going on, the more committees, the more activities, the better we are as a church, no, you're going to kill your families.
Now you can say that.
So I think you want them to come to church on Sunday, and if you guys have a prayer meeting like we do Sunday evening, I think you want them to come back for that. So you don't want them to treat Sunday like a second Saturday. Sunday's the Lord's day, give it here. You know, but Saturdays, I would as a church keep my hands off Saturdays for the sake of the families, for the sake of your relationship with your neighbors, so you can evangelize. I mean, just all kinds of stuff like that. That's not bad. Yeah. That's a little worse. Yeah, that's not so good. Because that's your family. That's like it's Monday. That's your one clear time.
The advice that I gave Rob that might be helpful for any other lay elders was to have a conversation among the elder board about expectations, to remember that every elder is a gift that brings something unique to the elder board. Figure out what it is that you're on the elder board to really contribute. And then as they're there, talk about this is, and then just do that well. Don't expect to have to do what everybody else is doing, but try and figure that out and do it well.
But I would press home that conversation with the eldership. Do we expect our people to be here Sunday? You know, do we expect most of us are going to have jobs through the week? Is there just a unified agreement we should have about then Saturday? I would encourage you to help that to be a conversation among your elders. Yeah. Yes.
So in light of that, do you have anything helpful to recommend for churches that are trying to actively disciple people in groups that might be specific? If Sunday is the Lord's Day and they want to do something maybe outside of that that's a little bit more intensive that people desire to even have, would you prefer them to give up their dinner times with their families, or what would you recommend for that?
Depends on what kind of thing it is. I mean, if it's like a once a year, half-day thing, Saturday's fine, I think. But if you're finding like once a month or once or twice a month, you've got a Saturday thing, well then effectively you're killing people's weeks. It's much better to take, I think, one evening out of a week, especially if this is something that's going to be maybe after dinner. I don't know. We'd have to get into the specifics, but it's a good conversation to have with your elders.
Amen. And part of this goes to your sort of vision of the Christian life and the life of your church, right? So if you've got a kind of overly programmatic view of the church and how the church operates and functions, that oftentimes is what leads to the crowding of the schedule and the squeezing out, actually, of a lot of things that you are also probably hoping your people do, like meet their neighbors and have them over for dinner and all that good stuff. But if you, I like the way Mark put it, if you strip down the sort of the programmatic agenda of the church, you just free up all of this space for people to live within their limits. You relieve yourself of a whole lot of pressure or need to feel like you need to pressure people and twist their arms to participate in some program so you feel successful. And you just allow them to actually pursue a life of peace and quiet in all godliness, and to sort of a life of being good Samaritan neighbors and evangelists and a whole bunch of other things that you can't program, but actually give a much farther reach and lead to, I think, a much deeper spiritual life.
So, go right ahead.
Okay.
Just a different train of thought there. Garrett, you said in your talk that you don't and you suggest not sharing things with your wife that will cool her love for other people. I wonder if you wouldn't mind elaborating a little bit on that in light of some of us who maybe have much, much smaller churches that don't have a plurality of elders or even that many deacons with whom we can bounce ideas off of and talk specifics with counseling situations and so forth.
Yep, I think it would heighten the need for you to find a friend somewhere else that you can talk to, another pastor friend that you can vent's not the right word, but process things with, right? I still think you want to guard her no matter what, especially I think even in a small church, because then it's all the more weighty on her if she knows all these different things about people. Now, if this is something that she's directly involved with, and you find that it's the conversation that's going on all the time in the home, and it's just toxic even in your home, there was a season where Carrie and I had to ban a couple people's names from our home, where we sat down, we cast our anxieties upon the Lord, knowing that He will care for it better than we could, and that it was crushing us. So we said, Lord, this person and this person, we give them to you. It's hard for us. We don't know what to do. We're going to not talk about them in our home. Would you give us peace? We need help. And gave it to the Lord. And you know what? It was really sweet. And the Lord did fix it a lot better than we could have in the end. So
when you turned up at church that following Sunday, had He taken them?
No, not immediately. Yes. No, I mean, He changes people, and He does it better than we do. So it just, we couldn't handle it, basically.
So I love Bobby's illustration of the hawk and developing the kind of eyesight of the hawk, looking for grace. And it reminded me of sort of a practical application of that. I learned from Max and Leanne Stiles, talked about a season where they were sometimes talking about students and student ministry and felt like sometimes they were helping each other develop not necessarily the best perspective on people. And so they just created a little rule between them that if ever they were going to say something critical about a person, they had to say 3 genuinely positive things about the person, 3 evidences of God's grace in the person. And sort of just trying to weight themselves, even in the habit of their conversation, towards seeing God's grace in their life.
So did that mean sometimes they just stop talking about some people?
I think that's a practical implication. And what our generation, at least, what did my mother tell you? If you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything at all. That's still a dictum, particularly if it's going to be the kind of gossip that spills over in your wife's heart and poisons her heart toward people in the church.
Yes. Sam.
Sam Sinclair. I'm pastor at Cloverleaf Baptist Church in Mobile, Alabama. And currently I'm bivocational. It's a smaller independent Baptist church.
I'm just curious, if you're bivocational, would you stand up right now? Bivocational. Thank you, brothers, for taking the time to be here. God bless you. Yeah. Keep going, Sam.
And one of my goals is to transition to a plurality of elders. We currently have a solo pastor, that's me, and a board of elders. And church has a very low change tolerance. They've always done things a certain way. And I think in the independent Baptist world, change is a scary thing for a lot of people. So my question is, how do you lead from that current model with deacons and move towards the plurality of elders?
Do you have a lot of opposition in the church to the idea?
Not necessarily. I think it's just a brand new idea that people have not ever.
How
been
large
exposed
is the
to.
church?
We got about 35 people.
How many deacons?
5.
Are any of those deacons qualified to be elders? Well, sorry, I shouldn't. This is, yeah. I would certainly consider what potential elders you have. And if you're not sensing a lot of opposition, I think you teach and teach and teach and teach. And then with 35 people, it shouldn't be that hard to gauge how are people hearing this. And then when they're okay, I would just move ahead and change your constitution to make it clear. And then by the time that gets finished happening, pray the Lord will have just raised up a couple of other guys that you can see meet the qualifications of elder. Am I missing something? Is that?
No, that's helpful. I guess, how do you work with the deacons as well, with them understanding their new role? Because I think a lot of them are functioning as quasi-elders.
Well,
but not
you
quite
make
there.
sure and just point out that in the deacons and elders qualifications, in the pastorals, there is the important difference of apt to teach for the elders, and that suggests a different focus for the offices. Then if you do trace that back to Acts 6, and you take the apostles as ministers of the word, deacons of the word, and the other brothers, those 7 that are listed there as deacons at the table, helping the widows, then I think you see the kind of distinction that generally churches have perceived between elders and deacons. You just teach on that real clearly, see if all the brothers seem to understand that. If that's not contentious, if they all agree with that, then I think that's helpful. You're not trying to teach them into being elders. You're trying to show what the Bible teaches about deacons and about elders. Thabiti, other thoughts on this? Yeah.
What's the book Phil Newton and Matt Schmucker?
Leading elders
Elders in congregational
life. Do you know that book? Elders in Congregational Life by Phil Newton, Newton. I think you'd find that very helpful. Yeah.
Garrett, you'd referenced...
Can you stand up and give us your name? And
Austin from Christ the Rock Church, Elyria, Ohio. You had referenced the possibility of expanding on what a sabbatical might look like, what you might do, how that might all happen. That's not a possibility for me right now, but anticipating that it might be in the future, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Yeah. Just for reference later, if you want to read the document, I asked one of our guys to put it up online. So our delraybaptist.org is our website. Under resources, you'll see a thing called shepherd statements, where we kind of write what we think about stuff. Under there, you'll see our sabbatical policy. Basically, at our church, every year that a staff elder is there, they accrue 2 weeks of sabbatical. And basically what a sabbatical is the way we have it written up, it's a time for the pastor to step away from normal duties, to be able to focus on time with family and specific time of study or writing or something like that. So it's not a vacation, but it is where that daily burden of the church is not spinning. So I just got off of a sabbatical. That for me was the biggest thing. So I still prayed through the membership directory, knew things, but the weight of the constant, what's going on with this person, was removed for a month, which gave much clarity and joy. I think
your brother asked a question about how long.
Yeah, I think it depends on every church. That's what our elders think would be best for us. So I took my first sabbatical after 3 years. So I've been there 3 years, and in the summer, when things were slower, it took a month. That was when we had our 5th child. So it was a different kind of sabbatical. It was a different kind of resting. Then this last sabbatical was much different, and had time every day not every day, but many days where I go away and do some writing and stuff like that. So yeah, it's sweet. I encourage you to look at that. Again, delraybaptist.org, under resources, shepherd statements, and then you'll see sabbatical policy there.
Got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if we can get a couple quick answers in here. Anything else? Unless there are no more questions left. Yes, Becker.
Will Binkley, Spring Creek Baptist Church in Clarksville, Tennessee. We spoke and if maybe you can speak briefly, we talked about guarding your wife from conversations, and she's your partner in ministry. Can you guys speak to any principles you put into place about protecting your kids from those same conversations?
I don't know, because our church right now is a really safe, enjoyable place for them. They haven't grown up in a difficult situation, so somebody else would have.
I think it's a little easier if I was understanding what Garrett was saying correctly, because those are not conversations I would have naturally had with my kids when they were in the house, in the same way I would with my wife. So that was an easier decision.
That's really the main thing. It's just not having those conversations before the kids. What my kids do get regular exposure to is our table fellowship and the hearing of testimonies and seeing me sort of ply people with questions about how they're doing spiritually and things of that sort. So they have an acquaintance with the congregation and the grace of God at work in the congregation, but it's almost all kind of formative in that sense, as opposed to hearing, the sort of negative things that might be percolating in my own head.
Okay, anything else? Yep. Yep. Name, church. Great question. Anybody? Deacons, deaconesses?
Guess I haven't said much. I could say something. The term is just the Greek word that could either mean the women or the wives. And I think because of the repetition of the qualifications, it makes.
You're in 1 Timothy 3.
Sorry, this is 1 Timothy 3. In the section on deacons, it's going to be verse 10, 11. What's that? 1 Timothy 3:11. Because there's a similar list of qualifications, it seems that it's repeating an office, not repeating a particular qualification for a wife. So, and given that there is not the teaching requirement and that it is not an authoritative office,
and there's no mention of the wives of elders in the same way.
And there's no mention of wives of elders in the same way. There would be no conflict with eldership being restricted to men, deacons including women, and in the full extent of service of different practical areas in the life of the church. It's not a separate or second office. Yeah, that's how we would practice at Capitol Hill.
The only other thing I'd say is that in 1 Timothy 2, the only thing that women are forbidden from doing is exercising authority over men and teaching men, and deacon role doesn't require either of those two.
What's very interesting, if you look at the history of deaconesses, our church was set up with deaconesses in the 1870s, and one of the simple reasons for that is because it was the deacon's job to physically prepare the person for baptism. So you're going to want women deacons doing that with women. And when you go back to early literature on deaconesses, where that is clearly an office in the 3rd century and the 4th century, part of what they're doing is preparing the women for baptism. So it's so funny. There's just this long consistency in that.
Can you point me to just maybe one or two resources that explain the exegesis of those texts? Although I did understand yours in this moment, but just to...
There's a couple of articles on the Nunmark's website on this. I think Ben Merkel has a helpful treatment of it in his 40 Questions on Elders and Deacons, although I can't remember.
I have that. He argues against
the opposite.
Your position.
Okay, well, I'm sure he makes some good...
Unhelpful reference.
Well, I'm sure he makes some good arguments. I think Andreas Kostenberger, I can't remember where he's addressed it, but I think Andreas Kostenberger would affirm deaconesses. He now has a commentary on 1 Timothy, sorry. And Kostenberger somewhere.
And friends, I think, unless you've got a short one back here, who was there one over here?
Short question.
Short question.
Not a person.
Right. Going once, going twice. James, are we done? No, okay. Caleb, very briefly. Caleb Morrell. Microphone.
Quick question about time management. How do you guys think about managing your time, weekly schedule? Any advice for guys in ministry not wanting to waste their time, set goals well?
Any general fruitfulness?
As a pastor?
Yeah, as a pastor.
As a pastor. Plan your time, plan your weeks. For me, that means the first thing I put in my calendar is sermon prep days. Thursdays and Fridays blocked out. That's all I do, unless there's some extraordinary situation. The other thing I put in the calendar, the next thing I'll put in my calendar then are sort of study in preparation for other things. So it could be our Thursday night Bible study, or it could be something that the elders are working through and trying to think through, or I could be dealing with a counseling issue where I need to actually sort of be into some other resources in order to effectively counsel. So I put that other study time in as well. Then we got standing meetings, staff meetings, things of that sort, plug those in. And then around all of that is where I'll do a lot of sort of counseling and other kinds of activity with folk, visitation and so on. So put the big rocks in first, put the smaller rocks in around that, and then work your schedule, right?
Just unrelated, just an encouragement for you, brothers. So one of the things, I used my wife several times as an example in my talk. I don't think I was as clear about how helpful she has been to transform me. I am an infinitely better pastor and man because of her. And I just encourage you guys when you go home, maybe on your travel, to come up with 2 or 3 things that you're really specifically thankful, and encourage her, like Bobby talked about in his talk, to give specific evidences of God's grace that you've seen in her in ways that she has helped you to be a better man and pastor. That would probably really bless her.